Hi there, Kendra Tolbert here. I'm a registered dietitian and yoga teacher, and I specialize in women's health and fertility. And today I will be sharing with you the very simple method and the very simple tools that I use to track my menstrual cycle. About a year and a half ago, I shared a video all about how I track my menstrual cycle, and in that video I was using an app, I was using OPK strips sometimes, progesterone test strips sometimes, and I was also using a thermometer sometimes. I no longer use those things, and there are a few reasons that I no longer use those things. The first reason, and probably the most important reason, is because I love simplicity. I am such a huge proponent of keeping things simple. I think there can be this idea, and I'm even going to call it a temptation, to complicate our health, complicate our fertility, complicate our menstrual cycles. These things are complex. Our bodies are incredibly complex, but that doesn't mean that our self-care and our understanding and our support of our bodies, of our fertility, and of our menstrual cycles has to be complicated. Things can be complex and we can still approach them in a simple manner. And so that's what I choose to do with yoga and nutrition and fertility and menstrual cycle tracking. The other reason, or one of the other reasons, is that I really do value my privacy. So I was using an app at the time. I no longer use an app because some things have come up about how our data may be being misused when we use certain apps. So I simply choose not to use any apps to track my menstrual cycle so that I can keep my private information private. I like to keep those things private. So that's also a reason that I choose to do that. The third reason that I choose to is because it was quite wasteful for me to be using OPK strips and progesterone test strips. There's so much packaging involved with those things. You have to pay for those things, and they really weren't giving me additional information about my menstrual cycle or my health. They were confirming the things that changes in cervical mucus, the length of my menstrual cycle, the length of my luteal phase, the changes in my libido. They were just confirming the things that those things were already telling me about my body. So they weren't providing additional information for me at all. And then the final reason is because I kind of want to push back against this whole consumerism that is just running rampant. When it comes to our health and our menstrual cycle, like we don't need a lot of that stuff. And I think this newfound interest in menstrual cycle health is causing a lot of people to look at it as a way to make money, which is fair. People need money to survive. But I do think sometimes the marketing gives us an idea that we need those things to have a full understanding of our menstrual cycles. And that's simply not true. Plus, some of those things, not the ones that I was using. The ones that I talked about in those videos, I love those things. I just choose not to use them anymore. But some of the more expensive devices, I've been gifted some of those devices and I don't use them because they haven't been that great. So anyhow, point is, I like to keep it simple, and I hope that what I share here encourages you to explore the idea that you can keep it simple too. So let's dive right in. Let's take a look at how I do it and see if you're inspired as well. Okay, so here we have it, a paper calendar and a pen. This is not the calendar that I use when tracking my cycle because I do want to protect my privacy, but this is absolutely the pen that I usually use to track my cycle, though I do use others. So the first thing that I'm going to show you are the symbols that I use when tracking my cycle. So the first symbol is this wave shape that I use to indicate that I am bleeding. The second symbol is this square that I use to indicate that I am dry. For me, that means that I am not bleeding and I do not have or have not felt or seen cervical mucus that indicates that I'm in my fertile window. So I'm not noticing a slippery or wet feeling, and I have not noticed it when wiping either. So that is when I will use dry. No bleeding, no fertile mucus. The next symbol that I use is this triangle or delta symbol, and I'll use that when I do notice the presence of cervical mucus. That's either feeling it or seeing it. The fourth symbol that I use is a question mark, and I will use that to indicate that that date is when I expect my next cycle to start. And then of course I use numbers to show where I am in my cycle, what day I am in my cycle. So I am just going to demonstrate what it might look like. So let's say that my period started on the 3rd of August. So on the 3rd of August, I would mark a 1 and I would put a little wavy line to indicate that I was bleeding on that day. Then on the 4th, still bleeding, still on my period, I'd do a 2, second day of my cycle, and a wavy line. Day 3, still bleeding. So give it a little line. Day 4, still out here bleeding. Give a little squiggle line. Now let's say we get to day 5 and the bleeding has stopped. I don't notice cervical mucus and I feel dry, so I mark dry. Day 6 comes. By the end of the day, I have not noticed any blood, any spotting, or any cervical mucus, so I put a square. Day 7 comes, same thing. Day 8 comes, same thing. Now day 9 comes and something has changed. I actually start to notice cervical mucus and it feels a wee bit slippery. So then I mark with a triangle. Day 10 comes, still feeling slippery. Day 11 comes and I've been noticing throughout the day that there is a slippery feeling. So put another triangle. Day 12 comes, same thing, still noticing some slipperiness of some sort, either at my vulva or while wiping. Now day 13 comes and it changes again, right? I go back to feeling dry. I don't notice any bleeding and I don't notice any cervical mucus that has that slippery quality. So I would mark dry. Day 14, dry again. Day 15, dry again. Now, after 3 days of dryness, I make the assumption that I ovulated somewhere around here. So I then count 2 weeks ahead and I put a question mark because presumably my next period will start around here. That may or may not happen, but that's the assumption I make based on the fact that the last time I had a slippery feeling was on day 12, and typically my luteal phase is about 2 weeks long, so 2 weeks later, I'd expect my period to start. So somewhere around here, and I'll also put a question mark the day after that and the day before that, just to remind myself that it could be sometime around one of these dates. Now I continue to mark down what I experience. Still dry, still dry. Now, after a while, I typically will stop marking down whether there's blood or dryness or mucus, unless of course something really changes, like suddenly there's spotting or suddenly there's a whole slipperiness that's happening. Then of course I'll mark that down. But if nothing is changing, I will just go to putting down the numbers. Now at this point, I'm thinking, ooh, we're coming near the time when my period is expected to start based on when I assume ovulation happened. So maybe we get to the 27th, day 25, and my period doesn't start. So I cross out that question mark. We get to 28, my period still hasn't started. So we cross out the question mark. We get to day 27, my period actually has started. So it's not day 27. I cross out this question mark and I put a 1 to let myself know that my new cycle has started. And I put a wavy line to let myself know that I was bleeding during that time. So those are the symbols I use, and that's how I use just a pen and paper to track my cycle. Okay, so what did you think? Did it seem simple to you? I definitely think it was simple, but I've been tracking my cycle for 7 years, so this is kind of a mishmash of all of the things that I've learned along the way from tracking my own cycle, from taking 2 courses on cycle tracking, from reading books and articles about cycle tracking and listening to all the podcasts about it. So This is what makes the most sense to me and for me based on all that information that I've gathered. It may not be right for you, but if it did inspire you to learn more about menstrual cycle tracking, I do have some resources that you can check out in the description box below. There you will find links to find out more about working with a fertility awareness educator, some courses that you might want to consider, and some books that you might want to read. All right, I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you enjoy the rest of your day. Be well and bye for now.